This is my view of the world and my relationship to it. It comes down to the Cub Scouts motto, do your best. I will explain how I decided to do my best, what it means to me, and how it helps. I will touch on the topics of motivation, anxiety, religion, science, stories, pollution, and technology, but I will begin by acknowledging some unearned privileges. I have had more good luck than bad. I fall into a privileged demographic. I would not appear out of place in a lineup of United States presidents and billionaires. If I am in the American 99%, I'm close to the cutoff. I built a career on computer skills that originated with the unwieldy machines at the college where my dad's professorship gave me access. I am about 6 feet tall, healthy, and happy, and have a loving wife and wonderful children. Not to say that I've always had a smooth life, but neither race, poverty, chromosomes, legal status, queerness, physical disability, family, nor language barriers have slowed me down. I have generally overcome what did slow me down, mental illness and social anxiety. At 56, I am well positioned to give back to the world, if I find motivation. This is where the Credo comes in. I distinguish spontaneous urges and longings from chosen wishes and goals. When I become conscious of a longing, I consider whether to try to satisfy it. I may substitute a goal that seems easier to achieve or safer to pursue. For example, when I crave pudding, I may substitute herbal tea. I perform a mental activity akin to prayer, but directed at my own mind, not a divine being. I wish for either of two things, to obtain what I long for, or to stop longing for it. I long for meaning. I don't believe that I'll ever discover the world's inherent meaning or whether such a thing exists. Rather, I speculate on possible meanings and work to achieve my potential within their context. Perhaps I missed out by not having roots. The Bible Belt region where I grew up was unknown to my family before I turned 5, and soon after 18, I left it for good. My childhood peers and teachers seemed content with the heaven and hell framework. My parents' answers, though more secular, did no more to satisfy me. They let me draw my own conclusions. I felt burdened by a responsibility and an expectation that I would draw wise ones. I learned a name for this unpleasant feeling: existential angst. If gods exist, I suppose they concern themselves more with atoms and galaxies than with human souls. People couldn't have thought this in the 19th century because they hadn't discovered atoms or galaxies. But atoms don't have much personality, and galaxies are hard to manipulate. So my view seems like an unlikely basis for a religion. Myths and scripture, the good parts, were formulated by people who tried hard to understand their world and their place in it, and used imagination to fill in the gaps. When they were honest, they confessed their uncertainty. The people who do this work nowadays include scientists and researchers. Their community frowns upon presenting conjecture as fact, so they leave many gaps. But I do not speak as a scientist. This is not a scholarly publication. I will fill in the gaps in my modern understanding of world and self. I will offer multiple conflicting stories. I look for plausible stories, but doubt that I will ever come close to the truth. Unless I fill the gaps, I will have no answer to the question, what's the point? If I didn't consider purpose, my only motives would be pleasure and pain, comfort and discomfort, instinct and culture. In that case, I would not need a credo. If you study a human being very closely, it consists of about 50 octillion particles that come in three types: protons, neutrons, and electrons. The different arrangements of these particles make us unique and amazing, but all protons appear completely indistinguishable from each other. All neutrons behave the same, and so do all electrons. Why would I care about the interactions of some tiny particles? Does the large number of them matter? Should I care more about this semi-coherent group than some other particles? Should I care whether I live until tomorrow? From childhood until well into my 20s, I often longed to die. I did recognize biological drives. When I wasn't suppressing them in my shame, I could appreciate my drives for providing at least some clue what to do. Like everyone, I seemed destined to consume resources, wither, and die. Supposing that I managed to help or inspire someone, wouldn't they just do the same? My species seemed fated to kill itself and the planet. This way of thinking plagued me until I recognized my own will to live, and it occurred to me to choose radical self-acceptance. I started to take my feelings as ground truth and faced them squarely. Not that my feelings are always reasonable, sometimes they stem from wrong assumptions, but they are as real as any tangible thing, or even more real. In accepting myself, I gained respect for other people. I learned not to expect the world to bend to my will, but to deal with it on its own terms. I began a study of world and self that has defined my life. I view claims of the paranormal with skepticism. I haven't found any credible evidence of ghosts or miracles, but I don't rule them out. In fact, my credo involves non-physical worlds, which I acknowledge to be hypothetical and unscientific. Where science leaves off, I consider what is plausible. It is quite plausible that no meaning exists apart from random arrangements and deterministic interactions of elementary particles. I once held this atheistic view. But if so, what's the point? I find it also very plausible that transcendent meanings do exist. The meanings don't have to involve a special status of human consciousness or immortal souls, and I find it implausible that they would. Arrangements of particles can very well account for feelings of consciousness and beliefs in immortality. If you back up for a very wide view, humans and our planet seem like a tiny speck among the galaxies. If you look far enough in any direction, you see galaxies, all composed of the same kinds of particles that make up our bodies, plus black holes and dark matter, but those lack personality and are hard to manipulate. These facts, the submicroscopic structure and the vastness of space, reached human awareness in the 20th century. Culturally, we have not had time to adapt to them. I am not even sure whether the knowledge of these facts is compatible with our survival as a species, but I am convinced of the facts. They are the structure whose gaps my credo must fill. For starters, I acknowledge impermanence. The fate of the universe is less clear than its immensity or the atomic theory, but still worth considering. Myths describe an infinite future, eternal cycles, paradise, or punishment. The science on eternity is uncertain, but in the far distant future, it seems likely that the universe may become too stretched out and smooth to contain life, or even thinking machines. Closer to home, planet Earth will likely lose its oceans to evaporation within the next billion years, and later disintegrate in an expanding sun. Impermanence appears, too, in the limits to fossil fuel extraction, nature's capacity to sustain us, the United States national debt, and human mortality. Impermanence may cause anxiety and turn people away from a belief system. I, however, find it stimulating and, anyway, quite likely. If I, or the economy, or the planet, or the universe has a potential but will lose it, even trillions of years from now, this may motivate me to achieve that potential rather than wait. Along with impermanence, I recognize interdependence. The collection of particles that is speaking to you hopes to achieve its goals, but its work builds on the achievements of others, and the value of its own achievements depends on how others will use them. I am not an island. What I do on my own is less interesting than the collective activities of groups that include me. A friend of mine speculates that our observable universe is equivalent to a dying ash falling from a cigar in some larger existence. This view seems close to atheism, but the two differ crucially. Might we steer the tiny ember? Can we influence whether it lands in an ashtray, pollutes the air, or ignites a fire? Though far-fetched, this represents a genre of meaningful universe stories. Here I should note that my speculation stops at the next outer universe, if there is one. Finding meaning out there is someone else's problem. It could be, as they say, elephants all the way down. The atheistic belief in an absence of universal meaning is quite plausible but unmotivating. Also plausible is that the world has meaning, but that we humans must evolve for millions more years before we can discover it. Barring space colonization, this would assign the biosphere a crucial role during an era when human activity threatens it. That line of reasoning inspires curtailment of the ongoing ecocide. However, I am skeptical that any distant descendants will have better odds of solving the riddle than we do now with our access to information and our economic might. I do not take for granted that our privileges would survive a planet-friendly regime. I strongly support studying and teaching about the threats of resource depletion, pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change. But as for efforts to reduce these threats, my enthusiasm wavers. Astrophysical considerations constrain the biosphere's ultimate fate with far more certainty than any human activity. Maybe a divine intelligence monitors and intervenes in human matters. Perhaps it inspires some people to write and spread its messages. Perhaps it experiences anger, love, jealousy, or pride, depending on our behavior. Perhaps it sections off a piece of itself whenever a human spermatozoon enters an ovum. Perhaps the piece participates in the body's feelings and receives eternal punishment or reward once the body dies. This is how I might fit mainstream religion into what I know about atoms and galaxies. I find religion compelling, even if only as fiction. The stories, prophecies, art, and music often satisfy me as metaphors in their historical context. But they add little to my views of world and self, so I shrug my shoulders at claims of divine revelation and afterlife. Some folks argue for space colonization. I am about as skeptical of humans living on other planets as I am of saving ours. I could be wrong on either point, so good luck, but I focus elsewhere. I am a citizen of a privileged country. Although I might rather it didn't, the United States rules over much of the world militarily and financially, extracting tribute in the form of low-interest treasury loans, acceptance of printed dollars, and unfair trade policies. The country's dominant caste, which claims me as a member, has profited materially by theft of land and labor. The resulting wealth and harm bring responsibility and anxiety. I am a member of a privileged species, the global apex predator. We humans give ourselves more rights than we recognize in animals. We hunt, burn, or tear down what does not serve us and replace it with crops, livestock, trash, and golf courses. I live at a privileged time, though it may all come crashing down, and several independent lines of reasoning suggest that it will. Still, the economy and the natural environment support a growing human population. Material wealth disparities plague us, yet an overall upward trend stands out. Access to information far surpasses recent limits. This increases humankind's potential to understand the present and perhaps influence the future. I inhabit a privileged planet. Earth has had liquid oceans for most of 4 billion years, allowing intelligent life to evolve. A rocky planet in the Goldilocks zone, Earth benefits from a large moon that makes the tides that formed the pools where life may have developed. Several other unlikely circumstances have combined to allow our planet to serve as a home. Earth may very plausibly hold the only life in the universe. If so, we Earthlings may play a unique role in its future. Human bodies don't do well in outer space, and Earth's habitable phase is slowly winding down. That leaves machines as our most likely legacy. I find it very plausible, but far from assured, that humans will create superhuman intelligence. If we create it, it may improve upon itself over and over until it becomes what we would call godlike. Many people disagreeing with my view on consciousness believe that a machine intelligence explosion can't happen. Others consider one inevitable and either panic or rejoice at the prospect. I find it right at a sweet spot, midway between impossibility and certainty, where actions chosen today may prove decisive. I do not consider it likely that gods created our world in order to develop intelligence. Not likely, but plausible. If I compare the likelihood of that to atheistic nihilism, atheism seems far more likely. But such a head-to-head comparison leaves out an infinity of other plausible, meaningful universe stories. The Reverend Janet C. Bush, for instance, has speculated on the creation of beauty as a universal purpose. Taken together, such stories seem no less likely than atheism. It so happens that stories about AI are where I have an opportunity to participate, so I fixate on them. If universal meaning exists, if matter matters, then I, who am matter, wish to participate in that meaning. I don't expect my puny mind to grasp details of the meaning, but I participate by discovering my potential, striving to achieve it, and joining my neighbors in achieving our collective potential. That is, in doing our best. This attitude happens to promote happiness, and putting a philosophical context around it soothes my anxiety. When faced with hard decisions, my favorite stories guide me. When new stories attract me, my values change. Changing values can disrupt relationships, so I exercise patience as I align my life with new values. I remind myself that no story of world and self is certain, that I continue to learn and grow, and that nobody shares my views in every detail. Thank you.